Most brides worry about bad weather on their wedding day. I spent mine watching my own parents march into my reception wearing pitch-black clothes, looking like they had come to bury me. 80 of my guests froze as the whispering started, buzzing through the room before my mother even reached the microphone. She didn't wait for an invitation. She marched straight up to the stage, snatched the mic right out of the DJ's hand, and stared me down. "We are mourning the daughter we lost," she announced to the dead silent room. What she said next made my blood run cold and my hands violently shake. But what my husband did next, the secret recording he played for the entire room to hear, that is the part no one in our small town will ever forget. Before I dive into the darkest, most defining day of my life, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with stories about surviving toxic families. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you all are tuning in from. I'm Chloe, I'm 31, and this is the true story of how my own family tried to rob me blind at my wedding, and how I took back everything that was mine. Now let me take you back 22 months to the day I wrote a check that changed the trajectory of my entire life. The phone call came in the middle of a frantic double shift. I was wiping down the stainless steel exam tables at the county veterinary clinic, my hands smelling faintly of antiseptic and dog treats. I liked working with animals. They were honest. You heal their wounds and they trust you. Humans are much more dangerous. "Chloe, come home," my mother's voice crackled through the speaker. It wasn't a request. Her tone was tight, brittle, and masking a deep panic. "Now, it's urgent." I drove through the heavy, blinding Georgia rain, my windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm. Oak Haven was the kind of small town where secrets rotted quietly behind perfectly painted white fences. My family's fence was no different, but today the rot had finally reached the surface. I stepped into my childhood home and the air hit me like a wet towel. It was thick with the sharp smell of mildew and defeat. The house was literally dying. The roof was weeping dirty brown water down the living room drywall, pooling on the hardwood. The foundation had cracked like a jagged spiderweb along the east wall, letting the storm seep right into the bones of the building. Below us I could hear the faint echoing drip of the basement flooding from the original 1984 plumbing that had burst for the second time that year. Mom sat stiffly at the head of the dark kitchen table. Dad slouched beside her, staring blankly at his calloused hands. There was an empty chair directly across from them, Aubrey's chair. "Where is she?" I asked, shrugging off my soaked coat. I watched a drop of water fall from the ceiling and splash into my father's cold coffee. Mom didn't look up. Her jaw tightened, a small unnatural tick pulsing near her temple. Aubrey texted. "She's super busy at work in Atlanta," she said. "She said we need to figure this out on our own." Figure this out. My sister was the blazing sun in the Carmichael family solar system. Blonde, effortless, the town's eternal pageant queen. I was the shadow. Quiet, steady, the one who cooked the dinners while Mom drove her to rehearsals. My achievements, high honors, my clinic manager promotion, were tucked away in junk drawers, while Aubrey's ribbons plastered the refrigerator. Now that same refrigerator was unplugged, sitting in a puddle of muddy water. Dad finally spoke, his voice hollow and scraping with shame. "The pension and your mother's bookkeeping money barely cover the groceries, Chloe. A full renovation, we don't have the capital, we're going to lose the house." I looked at them, two people who had spent my entire life looking past me, staring over my shoulder to see what Aubrey was doing. But this was my home too. It held the few quiet memories I had of Grandma Davis, the only person who had ever truly looked at me and seen me. I could feel my pulse ticking in my throat. I had a secret, and speaking it aloud felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. "I have it," I said. Mom's head snapped up. Her eyes narrowed, searching my face with sharp disbelief. "Have what?" $112,000. Silence swallowed the kitchen. The rain hammered against the glass, heavy and rhythmic. It was Grandma's trust fund, locked away until I turned 25. Combined with 8 relentless years of double shifts, skipped lunches, skipped vacations, and dollar store shampoo. It was my safety net, my escape hatch from this town. "I'll pay for the renovation," I said, my voice eerily calm, though my heart pounded wildly against my ribs. New roof, intensive foundation work, copper plumbing, everything. Mom stood up slowly. Her eyes grew wide, shining with something I had spent my entire childhood starving for, total undivided approval. She crossed the kitchen and pulled me into a tight, desperate hug. I could feel her shaking. Her tears soaked my shoulder. "This house is yours, Chloe," she whispered fiercely into my ear, gripping my arms so hard her nails dug into my skin. "When we're gone, it goes to you. You earned it." Dad nodded slowly from the table, wiping his eyes, relief washing the heavy years off his tired face. You earned it, kiddo. There were no lawyers, no paperwork, no deed transfers, just a promise sealed in the damp, rotting air of a dying house. I handed over a cashier's check the next morning. It was the most expensive, devastating handshake of my entire life. The trap was set, and I just didn't know I had bought the cage. I didn't just write the check. I practically bled into that dirt. Every weekend, I sat in my freezing car outside the house, eating stale peanut butter sandwiches while I managed the contractors between my shifts at the veterinary clinic. I watched the old rotted wood get torn away. I tracked every copper pipe, every bundle of shingles, every gallon of fresh paint. The house became my second job. When the dust finally settled, the house stood tall, secure and beautiful against the Georgia skyline. It looked better than it had in 25 years. But a repaired foundation doesn't fix a broken family. I just didn't realize how quickly the cracks would show again. 4 months later, a violent autumn windstorm ripped through Oak Haven. My phone buzzed at 6 a.m. "Chloe, it's falling apart." Mom's voice was high and panicked. "The back porch roof, a piece of the soffit just tore right off. The contractors you hired cheated us." I pinched the bridge of my nose, fighting the exhaustion deep in my bones. "I'll find someone, Mom. Don't panic." The original crew wasn't answering their phones. I scrolled through local directories until I found a small independent contractor willing to come out on a Sunday. That is how Liam Vance walked into my life. He pulled into the pristine Carmichael driveway in a dented, mud-splattered white pickup truck. He didn't knock on the front door with a fake customer service smile. He stepped out of his truck, wearing scuffed steel-toe boots and a faded flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows. He took one hard look at the dangling aluminum on the porch, grabbed his tool belt and went straight to work. I stood on the lawn, watching him. He didn't rush, but he didn't waste a single second. Every movement was precise, calculated and steady. He had hands like sandpaper, and spoke maybe 50 words to me the entire first hour. But his voice, low and grounded, commanded a strange kind of peace. He fixed the shoddy work flawlessly before the afternoon sun even began to dip. I brought 2 glasses of iced tea out to the driveway. He lowered the heavy tailgate of his truck, and we sat side by side. The condensation dripped down our glasses. We didn't talk about the weather or my family. We just sat there, listening to the wind die down in the tree line. It was the most comfortable, quiet silence I had ever shared with another human being. My heart, which had been racing for 29 years, finally slowed down. We started dating 3 weeks later. But the peace didn't last. Bringing Liam into my family's house was like dropping a match into a dry forest. The first time he came to Sunday dinner, I felt the air pressure in the dining room plummet the second he walked through the front door. The table was set with Mom's good china. Liam washed his hands, but they were permanently stained with the honest dirt of hard labor. Mom's eyes darted immediately to his calloused fingers, then to his practical jeans, and finally toward the window, where his work truck was parked on her perfect concrete driveway. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The only sound was the sharp scrape of forks against porcelain. Mom set her knife down carefully. She dabbed the corners of her mouth with a cloth napkin. "So Liam," she began, her tone perfectly polite but lined with ice. "I see you came straight from a job site." "Yes, ma'am," Liam said evenly, framing a new residential build just past the county line. Mom tilted her head, a tight artificial smile on her lips. "Framing. I see. So what exactly do you do long term? I mean, surely this is just a stepping stone." She pronounced the word do like he had tracked mud onto her carpet. Dad just stared intently at his mashed potatoes, refusing to look up. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. I opened my mouth to defend him, but Liam didn't need me to. He didn't flinch. He didn't look down. He locked eyes with my mother across the table, his gaze steady and unflinching. "General contracting," Liam said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of an anvil. "Residential mostly. I build things to last, Mrs. Carmichael." Mom took a slow sip of her water. "How practical." That was it. The invisible gavel struck the sounding block. They had weighed him, judged him, and discarded him before dessert was even served. Aubrey happened to be visiting that week from Atlanta. During dinner she was sickeningly sweet. She beamed at Liam, her eyes wide. "Oh, a builder. How fun. You must be so strong." But I knew my sister. I knew the subtle mocking shine in her eyes. Later that night, the house was dark and quiet. Liam was asleep in the guest room downstairs. I was lying in my old childhood bed. The walls in this house were thin, something my $112,000 hadn't fixed. Through the drywall, I heard the faint, muffled sound of Aubrey on the phone with Mom in the hallway. "I mean, he seems fine, I guess," Aubrey whispered, her voice laced with heavy pity. "But is that really the best Chloe can do? He has no degree. He's just a handyman, Mom. It's a little embarrassing." I lay there in the absolute dark, my nails digging into my palms until they ached. My chest burned with a fierce protective anger. Liam was asleep downstairs, completely unaware that the people sleeping under the roof I paid for had already decided he wasn't enough. They were treating him exactly the way they had always treated me. I told myself to brush it off, to keep the peace, but the cold dread pooling in my stomach told me this wasn't just snobbery. It was the beginning of a war. 8 months after the renovation, I drove to my parents' house on a crisp, overcast Friday afternoon. I just needed a box of old college textbooks from my childhood closet for a new certification I was taking at the clinic. I hadn't been to the house in weeks. Something about the air inside had started to feel different since Liam came to dinner. Thicker, colder, like the walls I paid to reinforce were slowly closing in on me. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house was dead quiet. The kind of unnatural stillness that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. I walked up the hardwood stairs, the wood no longer creaking under my feet thanks to the new joists I had funded. I pushed open the door to my bedroom. I stopped dead in the doorway. My hand froze on the brass knob. My chest tightened so fast I couldn't pull in a breath. My room was gone, not just rearranged, erased. The soft, warm yellow paint I had chosen when I was 14 had been painted over with a harsh, glaring teal, Aubrey's favorite color. A heavy mirrored vanity I had never seen before sat in the corner where my old wooden desk used to be. An essential oil diffuser hummed on the nightstand, puffing thick clouds of lavender into the air. It choked out the faint, familiar scent of my old cinnamon candles. I opened the closet, empty. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my veins. At the clinic, when an animal's territory is suddenly wiped out, they pace, they shake, they look for a scent, a shadow, anything familiar to ground them. I felt exactly like that. I backed out of the room, my heart hammering against my ribs, and hurried down the hall, then out the side door into the detached garage. It was freezing out there, smelling of damp concrete and old motor oil. In the far corner, shoved carelessly behind Dad's rusted lawnmower, was a cheap, clear plastic bin. I walked over to it, my hands trembling. Inside were my textbooks, my high school yearbooks, and crumpled at the very bottom, pressed against the cold plastic, was the handmade patchwork quilt Grandma Davis had given me before she died. They hadn't just moved my things. They had thrown my history into the dirt to make room for Aubrey's vanity. I walked back inside, my blood humming with a quiet, terrifying anger. I found Mom in the living room. She was sitting in her pristine armchair, the one sitting on the floorboards I bought, casually filling out a crossword puzzle. The scratch of her pen was the only sound in the room. "Mom," I said. My voice was dangerously flat. "What happened to my room?" She didn't even look up. Her pen hovered over a box, her face completely relaxed. "Aubrey needs a proper space when she visits from the city, Chloe. Her apartment in Atlanta is so small, she needs room to breathe." "Where are my things?" I asked, though I already knew. I wanted to hear her say it. "In the garage." She finally looked up, her eyes landing on me with a flicker of mild annoyance. "You don't live here anymore. You have your own apartment. It doesn't make sense to keep a shrine to your childhood when your sister actually needs the space." A shrine. The bitter irony almost choked me. The entire house was a shrine to Aubrey. I forced myself to breathe. The air felt thin. "Mom, we need to talk about the house. About the agreement. What you and Dad promised me on the front porch when I gave you the check." In the kitchen doorway, a shadow shifted. Dad. He had been walking in to pour a cup of coffee. He stopped perfectly still. He definitely heard me. I watched his hand freeze around the handle of the glass pot. He didn't take a step forward. He didn't come in to back me up. He just stood there, hiding in the periphery. Mom sighed heavily. She set her pen down with a sharp clack against the end table. The mask of the sweet Southern mother slipped, revealing the cold, calculating stranger beneath. "We will figure the house out when the time comes, Chloe. Don't be pushy." Pushy. "I put $112,000 into this property, Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a low, desperate whisper. "That was Grandma's money. That was my life savings. I saved this house. Don't make this awkward." Mom's jaw clenched. Her eyes went hard, completely devoid of maternal warmth. "And we are grateful. But this is still our home. You don't get to dictate how we live in it. I looked at Dad's shadow in the kitchen. He slowly turned around, set the coffee pot down, and walked silently out the back door, letting the screen slam shut behind him. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet house. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. You can't reason with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. I turned on my heel, walked out the front door, and got into my car. I rolled all the windows down, letting the freezing Georgia air whip through the cabin, desperately hoping the biting cold would numb the terrible sinking realization settling in my gut. The handshake was a lie. They were going to take it all. When I finally pulled up to my apartment, Liam was sitting on the front steps, cleaning a set of drill bits. He took one look at my pale ghost-like face, and immediately set his tools down. He didn't ask me what was wrong. He didn't interrogate me. He saw the microscopic tremor in my hands, and the vacant stare in my eyes. "Come here," he murmured. He led me inside, wrapped a heavy wool blanket around my shoulders, and made me a grilled cheese sandwich. We sat on the worn couch in total silence. I stared at the wall while he sat beside me, a solid, immovable anchor in a world that had suddenly lost its gravity. I fell asleep leaning against his shoulder, exhausted down to my soul. I should have listened to the screaming alarm bells in my head that afternoon, because the nightmare hadn't even truly begun. Liam didn't buy a flashy ring, or rent out a restaurant. He knew me better than that. He proposed on a crisp Saturday morning, standing in the cramped kitchen of my drafty apartment. The heater was clanking softly in the background. He was holding 2 steaming mugs of black coffee. He set them down on the scratched laminate counter, wiped his calloused hands on his jeans, and looked at me. There was no hesitation in his eyes, just absolute, immovable certainty. "I want to build something with you, Chloe," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble that seemed to anchor the entire room. "And I don't just mean houses." I didn't need to think. I didn't need to breathe. I said yes before he could even finish the sentence. When he slid the simple, beautiful ring onto my finger, a wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over me. For the first time in 29 years, I wasn't in the background. I was the center of someone's world. I foolishly thought that maybe, just maybe, my family would want to share that light. I called Mom that afternoon. I sat on the edge of my bed, my heart fluttering against my ribs, and told her the news. The silence on the other end of the line was so heavy, so profound, that I actually pulled the phone away from my ear to check if the call had dropped. The screen was still brightly lit. The seconds ticked by. 10, 15. "Mom?" I whispered. "Already?" she finally said. Her voice was completely flat. There was no warmth, no surprise, no motherly joy. It sounded like I had just told her the weather forecast. Then, after another painful, drawn-out pause, she added, "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order." She didn't ask to see the ring. She didn't ask when the date was. She didn't even ask how he had asked me. The phone line clicked dead. I sat in the quiet of my bedroom, the joy draining out of me like water from a cracked pitcher. 2 weeks later, Aubrey flew home unannounced. She stayed for 6 days. It was a whirlwind of aggressive, highly documented family bonding. Through the glowing screen of my phone, I watched my own family function perfectly without me. There were photos of elaborate dinners Dad cooked, pictures of Mom and Aubrey taking long mimosa-filled brunches at the upscale cafe on Elm Street. Dozens of smiling selfies. I wasn't invited to a single outing. I wasn't even sent a text message. But the photos weren't the real danger. The photos were just the distraction. At the clinic, I learned early on how a pack of dogs turns on one of their own. It is never loud at first. It starts with a subtle shift in posture, a silent shared signal. The pack quietly isolates the target, cutting them off from the rest, long before the biting actually starts. My pack was circling me, and I was completely blind to it until my phone rang on a dark Monday night. It was my friend Mindy. She worked at the local post office, which in a town like Oakhaven meant she knew literally every piece of information, rumor and secret that moved through the zip code. "Chloe," Mindy said. Her voice was hushed, nervous. "Are you sitting down?" "I am now. What's going on?" I heard her take a deep breath. "Aubrey's been talking." A cold spike of dread hit the base of my neck. "About what?" "About Liam." Mindy paused, and I could hear the genuine pity in her voice. "Chloe, she went to the hair salon on Main Street. Half the town's church ladies were there. She told them that Liam pressured you into paying for your parents' house renovation. She's telling everyone he's a grifter, that he isolated you from your family so he could get his hands on your parents' property." I stopped breathing. The walls of my small apartment seemed to tilt inward. Mindy, that's insane. That's a complete fabricated lie. I paid for that house before I even knew Liam existed. I know, honey. I know, Mindy urged quickly. But Chloe, she didn't say it like she was being mean. That's the crazy part. She said it like she was heartbroken. She put on this whole act, crying about how worried she is about you. She said, between us, I think he's manipulating her. She used to be so independent. People are eating it up. It's all anyone is talking about. I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking so badly the device slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the hardwood floor. I stared into the dark corner of my living room, my mind racing, connecting the terrifying dots. My sister hadn't just insulted my fiancé behind closed doors anymore. She had taken it public. She had weaponized the town's gossip mill. In a place like Oakhaven, a juicy rumor at the salon becomes established fact by Sunday morning church service. But as the initial shock faded, a much darker, colder realization settled in my bones. Aubrey wasn't just being vicious. Aubrey wasn't smart enough to orchestrate a smear campaign just for the fun of it. She was building a narrative. If the town believed Liam was a dangerous, greedy manipulator, then my parents would have the perfect, socially acceptable excuse to never hand over the house they promised me. Aubrey was laying the groundwork to steal my life savings, and she was wearing the mask of a deeply concerned sister to do it. 3 weeks later, the phone rang. It was a Tuesday evening. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, addressing wedding invitations with a nice pen, trying to focus on the good things in my life. I saw Mom's name flash on the screen. My stomach immediately dropped, but I forced myself to answer. There was no small talk. No how was work. No how is the wedding planning going. Just a voice I barely recognized. It was cold, clipped, and ruthlessly certain. It was the voice of a woman who had rehearsed this exact conversation in the mirror. Your father and I have been talking, Mom announced. She didn't pause for me to say hello. We've decided the house should eventually go to Aubrey. I stopped writing. The tip of my pen bled black ink into the thick paper of an envelope. She's struggling to find her footing in Atlanta, Mom continued, her tone brisk, like she was reading a grocery list. Her rent is going up, and she needs a safety net. Chloe, you have Liam. You are going to be fine. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned stark white. The room suddenly felt incredibly small, the air too thin to breathe. Mom, I put $112,000 into that house. That was my life savings. That was Grandma's trust fund. You and Dad promised me on the front porch. A heavy, irritated sigh hissed through the phone speaker. It was a gift, Chloe. Please don't throw it in our faces. It's very ugly of you. We are very grateful for the gift, but you can't buy our home. 8 years of double shifts. 8 years of eating cheap noodles. My grandmother's final act of love for me. Repackaged in 10 seconds as a gift so they could comfortably hand it to a sister who hadn't even bothered to show up when the roof was caving in. You promised me, I whispered, my voice shaking, breaking under the weight of the betrayal. I saved you. Promises change when circumstances change. She snapped back instantly, her voice hardening into ice. Aubrey needs stability right now. And frankly, with Liam in the picture, and the things we've been hearing around town about him, I am not sure your priorities are where they should be. There it was, the trap snapping shut over my bones. She wasn't just stealing my money. She was using Aubrey's fabricated, malicious lies about the man I loved as the moral justification to do it. She was turning me into the villain so she could sleep at night. You're stealing from me, I said. My voice was suddenly dead calm. Mom hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Dad. He was calling from his separate cell phone, the audio muffled like he was hiding out in the garage. Chloe, he said. His voice was quiet, worn down and utterly pathetic. Just let it go, kiddo. Your mom's mind is made up. You know how she gets. Aubrey needs the win right now. And my future dad? I asked, a hot tear finally spilling over my eyelashes and burning down my cheek. My money, my sweat in that house. A long agonizing pause stretched over the line. I could hear him breathing heavily. I don't want to lose anybody, Chloe. Let's just keep the peace. You already are losing someone, Dad. I pressed the red button and ended the call. I didn't cry after that. I just felt completely hollowed out. I sat in the dark living room at 1 a.m., the only light coming from the harsh blue glow of my laptop screen. I pulled up my old bank statements. I stared blankly at the line item highlighted in yellow. A wire transfer for $112,000, dated 26 months ago. There was no formal contract, no deed transfer, no impartial witnesses beyond a kitchen table conversation. If I stayed silent, I would lose every single cent, and Aubrey would undoubtedly sell that house the absolute minute the deed was in her name. But if I fought back, I would blow up my family forever. I heard soft footsteps behind me. Liam walked into the kitchen, wearing sweatpants and a plain gray t-shirt. He saw me sitting in the dark. He saw the glowing bank statement. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew I wasn't. He pulled up a chair and sat close to me. He looked at the screen, read the massive number, and then looked at my tear-stained, exhausted face. "Tell me everything," Liam said softly. "Start from the beginning." So I did. I opened the floodgates. I told him about Mom's brutal phone call, Dad's cowardly resignation, Aubrey's calculated rumor campaign at the hair salon, my childhood room painted teal, the trust fund, all of it. Liam listened intently. He never interrupted. He didn't slam his fist on the table or yell about how unfair it was. He just watched my face. When I finally finished, his jaw was tight, a small muscle ticking dangerously near his ear. But his voice was completely, terrifyingly steady. "Do you have the exact receipts from the renovation?" Liam asked. I blinked, thrown off by his calm logic. "Yes. Every email, every invoice, the bank statements. Right here on the hard drive." "What about the contractor you hired before we met? Marcus Thorne. Would he remember the arrangement?" "He'd definitely remember," I said, wiping my eyes. "I was the only one who called him. I paid him directly from my account. My parents never even signed a single work order." Liam leaned back in his chair. He folded his thick, calloused arms across his chest. In the dim light, I could practically see the gears turning in his head. He wasn't reacting with blind, useless rage. He was calculating. He was reading the blueprints for a defense that hadn't even been built yet. "Good," Liam said, his voice dropping an octave. "Keep all of that. Screenshot everything. Back it up to a secure cloud drive tonight. Not just this local hard drive. And Chloe?" He reached out and took my shaking hand in his warm, solid grip. "Do not confront them. Play completely dumb. Let them think they've won." "What are you thinking, Liam?" I whispered, a shiver running down my spine. He looked at me, his dark eyes incredibly gentle but sharp as broken glass. "I am not going to let them steal your future. But we have to do this smart. We don't fight them in the mud. We just hand them the shovels, and we let them dig their own grave." He squeezed my hand firmly, stood up, rinsed his coffee mug in the sink, and went back to bed like he had just figured out a simple math problem. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. Starting that night, the rhythm of our small apartment completely changed. Liam became a man on a quiet, methodical mission. I would wake up at 5 a.m. to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft blue glow of his laptop illuminating the kitchen. He would be sitting at the scarred laminate table, a thick manila folder open in front of him. He didn't explain. I didn't pry. I watched him from the hallway shadows as he carefully printed out my bank statements, Marcus Thorne's original invoices, and the before and after photos of the renovation. He handled the paperwork the exact same way he handled his tools, with absolute precision, checking the angles, looking for structural weaknesses. He was building a case the way he built a house, from the foundation up, making sure it was completely weatherproof, despite the looming shadow of my family. We set the wedding for September 22nd. We had a strict, microscopic budget. There would be zero financial help from my parents, but I didn't care. Liam and I paid for every single thing ourselves. We booked a beautiful, drafty, restored barn just outside the county line. The air there smelled like dried cedar and open fields. We hired a local farm-to-table caterer and bought buckets of untamed wildflowers from the morning farmers market. It wasn't a country club spectacle. It was authentic. It was ours. But the silence from my parents' house was deafening. Against my better judgment, my inner child, the little girl who still just wanted her mother to look at her, dialed her number one Tuesday afternoon. I just wanted to tell her we picked a caterer. She answered on the fourth ring. "Chloe, I'm busy. What is it?" Her voice was sharp, annoyed that I had interrupted whatever she was doing. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I just wanted to let you know we set the date, September 22nd. We're keeping it small." A heavy, unnatural pause hung on the line. I could hear a television playing softly in the background. Finally, Mom sighed, a slow, theatrical sound of exhaustion. "Chloe, I am going to make my stance clear right now so there is no confusion," she said smoothly. "I am absolutely not contributing a dime to a wedding with a man I do not trust. Not one dime. Your father agrees." My grip on the phone tightened. "We didn't ask you for a dime, Mom. We're paying for it ourselves. I just wanted you to know the date." "I see," she replied, her tone dripping with polite disbelief. "Well, do what you have to do." She hung up on me. "No, I love you. No, I'll be there." Just a dial tone echoing in my ear. I expected the cold shoulder. I expected the passive-aggressive distance. What I didn't expect was the sheer brutal psychological warfare that showed up on my phone screen the very next Friday. I was sitting on the couch, addressing envelopes, when my phone vibrated so violently it nearly fell off the cushion. It was my best friend Riley. She didn't call, she just sent a screenshot with a text in all capital letters. "Are you seeing this psycho behavior right now?" I tapped the image. My breath hitched in my chest. It was a post from my mother's Facebook page. A high-resolution photo of Mom and Aubrey standing side by side in a blindingly bright upscale bridal boutique in Atlanta. Aubrey was holding a stunning bejeweled white gown against her body, looking at herself in a massive gold-rimmed mirror. Mom was standing right behind her, her hands resting softly on Aubrey's shoulders. Mom was beaming. Her eyes were completely filled with the total, overwhelming adoration I had literally paid $112,000 to try and buy. The caption read, "Mother-Daughter Day in the City. Planning for the future. So blessed." Aubrey wasn't engaged. She didn't even have a serious boyfriend that anyone in town knew about. In the veterinary world, we see this sometimes. A phantom pregnancy. A dog's body will physically prepare for a litter that doesn't exist, driven entirely by a desperate psychological need. That's what this was. My mother and sister were staging a fake phantom wedding, just to steal the oxygen from my real one. I stared at the screen, a cold numbness spreading from my chest down to my fingertips. 62 likes. Comments from the church ladies poured in. "So gorgeous. Can't wait for the big day." And "Lucky mama." Not a single person in that comment section asked whose wedding they were actually shopping for. Because in the Carmichael ecosystem, there was only one daughter whose milestones mattered. The other daughter was just the bank. I didn't comment. I didn't hit the angry reaction button. I locked my phone, set it face down on the coffee table, and stared blankly at the blank wedding invitation in my lap. The ink was drying on the nib of my pen. That night the heater in the apartment clanked and hissed, but I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, the glowing image of that Facebook photo burning behind my eyelids like a brand. I felt completely hollow. Liam shifted in the dark. He reached out, his heavy warm arm pulling me back against his chest. He could feel the rigid tension in my spine. "You're thinking too loud," he murmured, his voice a low, comforting rumble against my neck. "I'm sorry," I whispered, fighting the tremor in my voice. I don't understand how they can be so cruel. How they can just erase me like this." "Don't be sorry," Liam said quietly. He kissed the top of my head, his grip on me tightening, anchoring me to the bed, to the room, to reality. "They are trying to break your focus. They want you emotional. They want you to blow up so they can point at you and say, 'Look how unstable she is.' We aren't going to give them that." I closed my eyes, letting his steady heartbeat regulate my own. "Just remember, Chloe," Liam whispered into the dark, his voice carrying a quiet, terrifying certainty. "People who need an audience to feel powerful will always end up destroying themselves in front of one. You just have to be patient enough to let them do it." 4 weeks before the wedding, the final devastating piece of the puzzle fell right into my lap. I didn't want to go back to my parents' house. The very thought of walking through that front door made my chest tight. But I needed the absolute last of my belongings. A box of Grandma Davis's fragile vintage glass Christmas ornaments. I knew they were packed away in the detached garage, and I refused to leave them behind. I pulled up to the house on a quiet, sweltering Tuesday afternoon. Aubrey's flashy silver sedan was parked perfectly in the center of the driveway, baking in the Georgia sun. I put my foot on the brake. I almost shifted the car into reverse. But the thought of losing the last physical piece of my grandmother pushed me forward. I got out and walked silently to the side door of the garage. It was unlocked. I slipped inside. The air was heavy and dim, smelling strongly of old tires, damp concrete, and rusted tools. I navigated through the shadows, found my labeled cardboard box on a high, dusty shelf, and reached up to grab it. That is when I heard it. Laughter. Sharp, cruel, and drifting perfectly through the open window directly above the garage roof, my old bedroom window. Aubrey was upstairs. "Once I get the deed to the house, I'm listing it immediately." I froze. My hands were gripping the cardboard box so hard that my fingernails pierced straight through the paper. The dusty air in the garage suddenly felt impossible to breathe. A man's voice answered. It sounded tinny and slightly echoed, coming from her phone speaker. "Your parents still don't know about me, do they?" "Not yet, Derek." Aubrey laughed. It wasn't her sweet musical pageant laugh. It was a harsh, ugly, scraping sound. "I'll introduce you after the house transfer is fully legally done. One bomb at a time, babe. Besides, we checked the comps, right? It's an easy $580,000 after what Chloe put into it. My blood turned to ice water. $580,000. My sister hadn't just stolen my home, she had already priced the walls I paid to rebuild. Derek chuckled through the speaker. It's wild they just gave it to you. Like 0 questions asked. Aubrey snorted. I could easily picture her rolling her eyes, examining her perfectly manicured nails while she destroyed my life. I told them Liam was only marrying Chloe for the property. Mom ate it up like candy. Honestly, it was almost too easy. Chloe is a naive idiot for pouring $112,000 into a house she'll never own. A naive idiot. The words hit me like a physical punch to the stomach. Every animal instinct in my body screamed at me to drop the box, storm up those wooden stairs, kick the bedroom door off its hinges, and tear her apart. My vision actually blurred with a red, suffocating rage. I wanted to scream until my throat bled, but Liam's deep, steady voice echoed in my head. Play dumb. We do this smart. Instead of screaming, I slowly, silently lowered the box onto a workbench. I didn't let my shoes scrape the concrete. I reached into my back jeans pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the device onto the hard floor, but I managed to grip it. I unlocked the screen, swiped with a trembling thumb to the voice memos app, and pressed the bright red record button. I stood completely still in the shadows, holding my breath, watching the red timer tick upward on the glowing screen. 30 seconds. 60 seconds. A bead of cold sweat rolled down my neck. What if she looked out the window? What if Dad came into the garage looking for a tool? I didn't move a muscle. I recorded 2 full minutes of my sister and her secret boyfriend Derek, laughing about defrauding our parents, insulting my fiancé, and plotting to sell my 8 years of labor for a quick, massive payday. Every cruel word was caught crystal clear on the digital tape. When they changed the subject to their dinner plans, I gently tapped the stop button. I saved the file. I immediately backed it up to my cloud drive right there in the dark. I picked up my box, walked back to my car, and drove home in a terrifying, absolute silence. When I unlocked the door to my apartment, Liam was sitting at the kitchen table, calmly reviewing old hardware store invoices. I didn't say a single word. I walked straight up to him, set my phone flat on the table between us, and hit play. He didn't move. He listened to the entire thing. The plotting, the insults, the $580,000 price tag. He didn't slam his fist on the table. He didn't yell. He sat perfectly still, his jaw locked, his dark eyes focused entirely on the screen. He was absorbing the shockwave. When the recording ended, the silence in the kitchen was heavy. He looked up at me. Is it backed up? He asked softly. 3 different places, I whispered. My voice finally cracked. The adrenaline suddenly crashed out of my system, leaving behind a pure, exhausting grief. I sank into the chair beside him. Liam stood up, pulled my head against his chest, and let me cry. It was the absolute last time I ever cried over my family. When I finally pulled back, he wiped my face with his rough thumb. I went to Macon today, Liam said quietly. He pulled a crisp business card from his pocket and set it on the table. I met with a real estate litigation attorney, Arthur Pendleton. I blinked, wiping my eyes. A lawyer? Just a consultation, Liam explained, his voice smooth and steady. Pendleton said that in Georgia, if you contribute a massive traceable amount of money to improve a property under a verbal agreement, and they refuse to compensate you, it falls under unjust enrichment. We have the bank wires. We have the contractor's testimony. We have an ironclad civil case. So we sue them? Going to court takes years and bleeds money, Liam said, his eyes darkening. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small black USB drive. We let the court of public opinion handle the settlement. Aubrey needs this house transfer done before we are legally married, so she can claim the money was a premarital gift. They are going to try something at the wedding, Chloe. Let me handle the DJ and the reception timeline. Do not say a word to them. 2 weeks before the wedding, the audacity reached its terrifying peak. Aubrey showed up at my apartment completely unannounced. She walked right through the front door, sat down at my kitchen table, and slid a single crisp sheet of paper toward me. The header, typed in bold black letters, read, "Acknowledgement of gift." It was a poorly drafted, legally questionable document stating that I, Chloe Carmichael, officially recognized that the $112,000 I spent on the family home was a voluntary gift with no expectation of ownership or reimbursement. Mom just wants peace of mind before you walk down the aisle, Aubrey said. She tilted her head, putting on her sweetest, most concerned pageant smile. Just a formality, really, to keep things clean between you and Liam. I looked down at the paper. Then I looked up at the sister who I had recorded calling me an idiot just days prior. My heart pounded wildly against my ribs, but I kept my face totally blank. I channeled Liam's terrifying calm. "I'm not signing this right now, Aubrey," I said smoothly. "I'm busy with wedding prep." Her smile flickered. Just for a millisecond, the incredibly cold, greedy mask slipped. "Fine, we'll handle it later." She stood up and left, conveniently forgetting the paper on my table. When Liam came home, he didn't throw it in the trash. He set it under the bright kitchen light, took high-resolution photos of it, front and back, and added it to his thick manila folder. The trap was fully set. Now we just had to wait for them to step into it. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. The air in our apartment felt heavy, thick with the electric charge of a storm that hadn't quite broken yet. I sat alone on the edge of the bathtub at 2 a.m., staring at the bathroom tiles. In the veterinary clinic, when we have to put a dog down, there is a very specific kind of silence that fills the room afterward. It's a heavy, final quiet. That was the exact silence filling my chest. I was grieving. Not for the family I had, but for the family I had spent 29 years pretending they could be. Tomorrow I was going to blow that illusion to pieces. I was going to burn the bridge, and Liam was handing me the matches. The sun came up on September 22nd sharp, and completely clear. The sky was a brilliant, endless blue. We drove out to the restored barn venue early in the morning. The air out by the county line smelled like dry cedar wood, crushed autumn leaves, and sweet grass. Vendors were rushing around, setting up 180 wooden chairs on the wide green lawn under a massive, ancient oak tree. The catering crew was carrying trays of polished glasses. It looked like a magazine cover. It looked like a dream. But beneath my skin, my blood was humming with a cold, terrifying adrenaline. Liam didn't leave my side all morning. He didn't pace, and he didn't fret over the flowers. He walked straight up to the DJ booth set up in the corner of the reception hall. He plugged his own sleek silver laptop into the venue's massive audio-visual system. I watched him quietly test the massive projector screen that rolled down from the wooden rafters. He checked the audio cables. He was totally focused, his face a mask of calm, professional concentration. He was treating our wedding reception like a demolition site. At 2 p.m., I retreated to the bridal suite tucked into the loft of the barn. My best friend Riley was there, humming a happy song as she pulled the delicate white lace of my dress tight across my back. The physical restriction of the dress actually helped. It held me together when I felt like I was vibrating out of my own skin. "You look breathtaking, Chloe," Riley said softly. She stepped back, her eyes shining with happy tears as she looked at me in the full-length mirror. "Liam is going to lose his mind when he sees you." I stared at my reflection. I didn't look like a blushing bride. My eyes were too dark, my posture too rigid. I looked like a soldier strapping on her armor. "I feel like I'm walking to an execution," I admitted. My voice was barely above a whisper. Riley frowned, stepping closer. She reached out to touch my arm. "Hey, it's just nerves. Everything is perfect out there. It's your day." Before I could explain what I really meant, Riley glanced out the small dusty window of the loft that overlooked the gravel parking lot. She stopped breathing. Her hand dropped from my arm. "Chloe," she gasped, her voice suddenly sharp and confused. "Look." I walked slowly over to the glass. I looked down. A sleek silver sedan had just pulled off the main highway and crunched onto the gravel lot. It wasn't parked with the other guests. It was parked dead center, right near the entrance to the lawn. The driver's side door opened. Mom stepped out first. My stomach dropped straight into the floorboards. She was wearing a floor-length, high-necked black dress. She had a thick black shawl wrapped around her shoulders and dark, sensible black shoes. It wasn't a sleek evening gown. It was funeral attire. Dad emerged from the passenger side. He was wearing a stark, heavy black suit and a solid black tie. His shoulders were slumped, his face pale and miserable as he looked at the ground. And then, the back door opened. Aubrey stepped out into the bright Georgia sun. She was wearing a fitted black cocktail dress, sharp black stiletto heels, and massive dark sunglasses that covered half her face. 3 people, dressed for a burial, marching in a slow, deliberate line toward my wedding ceremony. Riley was shaking with sudden violent rage. She realized exactly what they were doing. "Oh my God," she hissed, gripping the windowsill. "Give me the word, Chloe. I will go down there right now. I will have the groomsmen physically toss them into the highway." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The urge to run, to hide, to cancel the whole thing washed over me in a sickening wave. But then I pictured the plastic bin in the garage. I pictured the $11,000–12,000 wire transfer. I pictured the smug, cruel laugh on the audio recording. My panic vanished. It was replaced by a cold, absolute clarity. "No," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. I turned away from the window and picked up my wildflower bouquet. The stems felt solid in my hands. Let them walk in. Let them sit down. Let them dig. The heavy wooden doors of the barn opened, and the wedding march began to play. I gripped my bouquet of wildflowers so tightly my knuckles ached. I stepped out onto the green lawn, the dry autumn leaves crunching under my shoes. 180 guests turned their heads to look at me, their faces breaking into warm, bright smiles. But my eyes were immediately drawn to the front row. It was impossible to miss. In a sea of soft pastel dresses and light gray suits, my family sat like a dark, jagged hole in the earth. 3 figures, completely draped in heavy black fabric, staring straight ahead. A low, confused whisper started at the back of the crowd and rippled forward like a sudden breeze. People were leaning in, pointing subtly. I forced myself to keep walking. I put one foot in front of the other, my heart hammering a frantic, terrifying rhythm against my ribs. But then I looked up past the front row. I looked past the black dresses and the dark sunglasses. Liam was standing under the massive oak tree. The wind caught his dark hair. His eyes were shining with tears of absolute, unfiltered love. When he looked at me, the black-clad figures in the front row faded into meaningless shadows. He reached out, taking my shaking hands in his steady, warm grip. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, a silent promise. We said our vows. We kissed. The crowd erupted into loud, relieved cheers. We were married, but as we walked back up the aisle together, the dread returned, settling deep in my stomach like a cold stone. The reception began smoothly. The sun dipped below the tree line, and the barn glowed with hundreds of warm yellow string lights. The smell of roasted chicken and sweet corn filled the air. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed off the high wooden rafters. But for me, the beautiful room felt like a locked cage. I sat at our sweetheart table, pushing my food around my plate. Every few minutes, my eyes darted to table 1. Mom, Dad, and Aubrey sat in complete silence. They didn't eat. They didn't speak to the other guests. They just sat there, 3 dark statues, waiting for their moment to strike. "Eat something," Liam murmured softly, leaning close so only I could hear. "I can't," I whispered back, my throat completely tight. "My stomach is in knots." "When are they going to do it?" Liam took a slow sip of his water. His dark eyes scanned the room, calculating the angles, reading the crowd. "Soon. Let the tension build. They need the biggest audience possible." Right after the dinner plates were cleared, the DJ tapped his microphone. "All right, everyone." His cheerful voice echoed through the massive concert speakers. "We hope you enjoyed the meal. We'd love to open the floor for a few toasts from the family." He didn't get to finish the sentence. A heavy wooden chair screeched violently against the floorboards. The sound cut through the happy chatter like a knife. My mother was already out of her seat. She didn't wait for an invitation. She stormed across the wooden dance floor, her heavy black dress swishing angrily around her ankles. She walked straight up to the DJ booth, reached out, and practically snatched the microphone out of the poor man's hand. A sharp, high-pitched squeal of audio feedback blasted through the speakers. 180 people winced and fell dead silent. The music stopped abruptly. The air in the barn went completely, terrifyingly still. "I want everyone here to know," Mom's voice boomed through the speakers. It wasn't shaking with sadness. It was sharp, trembling with a terrifying, righteous anger. "That we are in mourning tonight." Gasps rippled through the room. At the table closest to us, my best friend Riley leaped out of her chair, her face flushed red with fury. But Liam reached out instantly, wrapping his large hand around Riley's wrist and pulling her firmly back down. "Wait," Liam whispered to Riley, his voice made of iron. "Let her talk." Mom turned on her heel and pointed a shaking, accusatory finger directly at Liam. "We are losing our daughter to a man who manipulated his way into this family. A man who isolated her from her own blood, all so he could steal our real estate." The silence in the room deepened into something heavy and suffocating. People were frozen, their wine glasses hovering halfway to their mouths. I could feel the collective shock of the town mayor, the church choir director, the ladies from the hair salon. "Chloe," Mom's voice cracked through the speakers, echoing off the wooden beams. "If you have any shred of decency left, you will clear the air right now. You will acknowledge to this entire room that our family home belongs to your sister, not to this outsider." Before I could even take a breath, Aubrey stood up. Her sharp stiletto heels clicked loudly against the floorboards as she marched up to our sweetheart table. She reached into her expensive designer bag. She pulled out the exact same crisp white piece of paper she had brought to my apartment. The acknowledgement of gift. She slapped the paper down right next to my dinner plate. She pulled a heavy silver pen from her purse and dropped it on top of the document. The pen rolled and clicked against my water glass. "Just say it on the mic, Chloe," Aubrey said loudly. She didn't use the microphone, but her voice carried perfectly in the dead silent room. She tilted her head, putting on a mask of deep, agonizing sisterly pity. "Tell everyone you renounce the money. Stop letting him control you. Come back to us." 180 pairs of eyes were locked directly on me. The social pressure in the room was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, begging me to just submit. They thought they had me trapped. They thought the fear of making a massive public scene, the terror of ruining my own wedding, would force me to pick up that pen and sign away a $112,000, just to make the awkwardness stop. They were betting everything on the quiet, steady girl who always chose the shadows. I stared at the heavy silver pen. My hand hovered over the table. I didn't touch the pen. I didn't even look at the crisp white paper. I just looked across the table at my husband. In the clinic, when an animal is backed into a corner, it has two choices: freeze or bite. My family had spent my entire life counting on me to freeze. But they had never cornered me while I was standing next to Liam. Liam stood up. He didn't slam his hands on the table. He didn't yell. He calmly buttoned the center button of his suit jacket. The silence in the room was so heavy it felt like the air had been sucked out of the barn. He walked with slow, deliberate steps toward the DJ booth, where his sleek laptop was already plugged into the venue's massive projector system. He picked up the small black remote. He turned to the crowd, his face a mask of cold, absolute precision, and he pressed the button. A loud mechanical hum filled the air. Behind the stage, a massive white canvas screen unrolled from the wooden rafters. It lit up the dark room with a blinding bright light. It wasn't a slideshow of our childhood photos. It was my official bank statement, blown up to 10 feet wide. A bright yellow highlight slashed across a single line item. A wire transfer for $112,000 to Thorne Construction. Liam clicked the remote again. The screen shifted to an email from the contractor, Marcus Thorne. The text was huge. Project paid in full by Chloe Carmichael. The low, confused murmurs in the room instantly turned into a rushing wave of noise. People were leaning out of their wooden chairs, squinting at the bright screen, their hands covering their mouths. My mother stood completely frozen by the stage, her face drained of all color, turning a sickly ash gray. She slowly lowered the microphone. Liam clicked the remote one more time. A massive, high-definition photo flashed onto the screen. It was the exact acknowledgement of gift document that Aubrey had just slapped onto my dinner plate. Then Liam delivered the final, fatal blow. He didn't just show slides. He reached down, unplugged the audio cable from the DJ's deck, and plugged it directly into his laptop. He hit play. He had spent hours adding kinetic typography to the file. As the voices played, every single word was typed out in massive, bold black letters across the 10-foot screen. The audio blared through the concert speakers, crystal clear and echoing off the barn walls. Aubrey's voice, crisp and laughing. "Once I get the deed to the house, I'm listing it immediately. It's an easy $580,000 after what Chloe put into it." The collective gasp from 180 guests sounded like the wind getting knocked out of the entire building. Derek's voice. "It's wild they just gave it to you." Aubrey's voice. "I told them Liam was only marrying Chloe for the property. Mom ate it up like candy. Honestly, it was almost too easy. Chloe is a naive idiot for pouring $112,000 into a house she'll never own." The recording stopped. The screen went black. The silence that followed was apocalyptic. It wasn't just quiet. It was the total destruction of my family's social existence, captured in one suspended breath. Aubrey looked like she had been physically struck by lightning. She staggered backward, her stiletto heel catching on the floorboards. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked like a suffocating fish. My mother dropped the microphone. It hit the solid hardwood floor with a deafening TOD that made the front row jump. She looked frantically around the room. Every single person, her church friends, the town mayor, the ladies from the salon she had lied to, was staring back at her with absolute unadulterated disgust. "Lord have mercy," Liam's Aunt Clara said loudly from table 6. Aubrey cracked first. The perfect golden child finally shattered. She grabbed her designer purse, spun around and practically sprinted for the heavy barn doors. Her heels slipped wildly on the wood as she burst out into the dark night, abandoning her parents just like she always did when things got hard. Dad finally moved. He didn't look at me, he looked completely and utterly broken. He grabbed Mom by the elbow, his grip tight and rigid, and pulled her toward the exit. They walked out of the venue, 180 people watching them flee into the shadows. Liam walked calmly back to our table. He sat down, took my freezing, shaking hand and kissed my knuckles. He looked out at the stunned, breathless crowd. "Sorry about the interruption, folks," Liam said, his deep voice smooth and grounding. "The bar is fully open. Let's celebrate." The cheer that erupted from the room shook the rafters. Riley popped a bottle of champagne, sobbing tears of pure, fierce joy. The music blasted back to life, and we danced. But the night didn't end perfectly. About an hour later, the flashing red and blue lights of 2 police cruisers reflected off the barn windows. Someone from the town, likely the mayor or one of the outraged church members, had called the police to report a major disturbance and a confessed fraud. Liam and I stepped out onto the cool gravel parking lot. The loud music thumped behind us as an officer holding a notepad approached. I stood in my white wedding dress, shivering in the autumn air, while the officer asked me questions. I felt completely numb. It was like I was watching a movie of my own life. I answered his questions with a detached, clinical calm. Yes, it was my money. Yes, I had the audio recording. Yes, they tried to make me sign a legal document under false pretenses. The officer took my statement, shook Liam's hand, and gave me a card. They would file a report, but because it involved property and a verbal contract, they advised us to handle the massive financial theft through our lawyer, which is exactly what we did. The next morning, Liam and I sat in Arthur Pendleton's quiet law office in Macon. "They are publicly ruined," Pendleton chuckled, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "I have already drafted the notice of intent to sue for unjust enrichment. Considering the entire town of Oakhaven, including Aubrey's real estate boss, just heard her confess to fraud on tape, they will not let this go to trial. They will settle." He was entirely right. In a small town, you don't need a judge to ruin your life. You just need a scandal. Aubrey's boss had been sitting at table 10. By 9 a.m. Monday morning, Aubrey was fired from her real estate firm for severe ethical concerns. Derek, the secret boyfriend, ghosted her entirely the second he realized there was no $580,000 payday coming. Faced with a devastating, highly public lawsuit and a fresh police report, my parents folded immediately. We never even saw the inside of a courtroom. 5 weeks after the wedding, Pendleton secured a legally binding out-of-court settlement. They agreed to full repayment of the $112,000 over 48 months, backed by a legal lien on their house. If they missed a single payment, we could legally force a sale. I signed the final papers in the total quiet of Pendleton's office. I felt no joy. I felt no victory. I just felt clean. I didn't want their house. I just wanted my money, and I wanted my dignity back. I got both. Mom stopped going to church for months. The social exile in Oakhaven was absolute. The casserole train stopped. The friendly waves at the grocery store vanished. Aubrey packed up her apartment and moved 2 states away, abandoning my parents the moment she realized she couldn't extract any more wealth from them. The golden child had never planned to stay. She was only there for the deed. Dad still calls me every other Saturday. They are short, awkward, 10-minute calls. He tries to talk about the weather or his garden. I don't forgive him yet. I might never truly forgive him for standing in the kitchen shadows while my mother robbed me. But I answer the phone. That is a start. Liam and I bought our own house. It's a beautiful, quiet fixer-upper just past the county line, surrounded by deep woods. Both of our names are on the deed, in thick black ink. I don't hate my parents anymore. Hate takes too much energy, and I need my energy to build my own life. But I learned a brutal, permanent lesson that I now carry deep in my bones. Family is just a word. Love is a feeling. But trust is a contract. Boundaries aren't brick walls meant to trap you. They are doors meant to protect you. And for the absolute first time in my life, I am the one holding the key. If you've made it this far, you know that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones born from the darkest truths. Surviving a toxic family requires a strength that can't be faked, and sharing these raw, unfiltered moments is how we find each other in the dark. If my journey resonated with you, if you felt the intensity of that betrayal, and the profound quiet peace of finally taking back your own life, please consider liking and subscribing. Stay connected with me for more true stories that refuse to shy away from the hard, necessary truths. You are not alone, and together we can keep building lives where we hold our own keys.